So does that mean in the past people didn't use evidence or what?
It's kind of sad to admit that, but absolutely, right?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Professor Govalla, and today I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Nina Govalla. And as you may or may not have guessed, she is my sister. And today we're going to be talking all about engineering and the medical field as well. And as you may have guessed, she's also the first female on the podcast. So welcome, Dr. Govalla. And just kick things off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, from where you're from, where you went to undergrad, like your majors, med school, residency, things like that. Anything you wish to add, if you can.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me on your platform. It's such an honor. Again, I'm Dr. Nina Govalla, and I'm honored to be the first female. Interestingly, Nina means first female in my dialect.
That's
So
true. Yeah.
it's fitting, right?
Yeah.
But a little bit more about my background. I'm originally from Cameroon, as my brother. And we moved to the United States when I was about 10 years old. Um, as far as my educational background, so I did my undergrad in University of Science and Technology in Rolla, Missouri. It's a very
Mhm.
small town in the middle of like Missouri. Um, and that was a really interesting experience. And then from there, I did my medical school training at the University of Missouri in Kansas City, Missouri. Then I did my intern year of residency in psychiatry at the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona. Then
Mhm.
transferred to Washington, D.C., to George Washington University to complete my last 3 years of psychiatry residency. Um, and I recently graduated from residency, so very excited to become an
Yep.
attending. I'm really excited for the rest of my career.
No, that's awesome. And I did also go to University of Arizona, and we did spend some time there as well, which was pretty cool and pretty interesting. I was gonna say that your university in Rolla was an engineering school, right? Predominantly
Yeah.
engineering, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, so that was a little correlation there. Um, but what I want to talk about now is I want to kind of say the basis of the interview or the video. I want to go into. Basically, this is for anyone who is technically sound, either in high school or in undergrad, whether it be in IT, engineering, um, civil work, architecture, the industrial field, who kind of wants to deviate towards the medical field, right? So think about someone who is like a biomedical engineer, right? Someone who deals with prosthetics, right? They need to understand the inner workings of the human body, but then also understand robotics in order to help um, a person who doesn't have an amputee, right? So anyone who is really technically sound and really wants to deviate towards the medical field, this video is for. And then also any of my engineers or any of my viewers who are just interested in the platform of specifically psychiatry and how it relates to engineering. Okay. So the first question I will have for you is, can you walk us through what a psychiatrist actually does day by day and how it's different from something like a psychologist or a therapist?
Yeah, so the biggest difference is that a psychiatrist goes to medical school, and because of that, we can prescribe medication. So we have full access, full capability of prescribing any medication. There are some states that are giving minimal prescription rights to therapists and psychologists, but those are like very, very basic medications. As a psychiatrist, you are an MD or DO, and so you can prescribe any medication.
Mm.
So that's really the biggest difference. Yeah.
Okay, so can a psychiatrist do what a therapist does?
Yes. Yeah. So thank you for
Yes. Okay.
clarifying. Yeah. So a
Okay.
psychiatrist can do what a therapist does. So that's part of our residency training. is that we learn how to prescribe the medications and we learn how to do therapy. Depending on what residency program you go to, some residency programs emphasize more therapy and others don't, or
Hmm.
others emphasize less therapy. I should put it that way because all of them do emphasize therapy to an extent. Also, there are multiple different types of therapy. So again, that depends on your training would depend on what sort of residency program you go to. Some residency programs emphasize more psychoanalytic, psychodynamic therapy. Others
Hmm.
emphasize more CBT. And then there's other types of therapy that that you can do on the side as well, like EMDR for PTSD and trauma-related symptoms. You can also get extra training in ACT and things like
Hmm. Okay. Okay. That's very interesting. And CBT, what does that stand for?
so that's cognitive behavioral therapy. Um,
Okay. Okay.
yeah. hmm
Okay. All right. So this is very fascinating because me personally, I'm very fascinated by the brain.
hmm
And I like to think of the brain as a system. I am also I also from especially for like my PhD, I build an entire system to bring tactile feedback to robotic minimally invasive surgery.
hmm
So as a psychiatry, I hear you guys deal with a lot of systems like for the brain, neurochemistry, and diagnostics, right? Do you
hmm
think there's a correlation in the mindset of a psychiatrist when compared to something like a systems engineer, where a systems engineer is tasked with, you know, kind of going into the brains of a system and finding a solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, like when we have a patient that comes in with psychiatric symptoms, so that could be delusions, that could be hallucinations, that could be depression or anxiety. We first have to think about it on the broad level. So we have to think about all the systems in the body that could be contributing to those symptoms before we say that it's due to a primary psychiatric illness. So, for example, if I have a patient that comes in with depression, I have to check vitamin levels. So, like vitamin D levels, I would have to check that. I will have to check the thyroid levels. I would also check the kidneys and the liver, and all of
Hmm.
these are sort of like different systems in the body that can essentially affect the brain and cause
Hmm.
depression. So, as a psychiatrist, I do have to think about how like the entire system of all the systems in the body can affect the brain, and ultimately lead to psychiatric symptoms. Mhm.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. So yeah. Go ahead.
and then another system related practice is sort of like on the sort of like the system of medicine. So if you're working, even if you're working in the hospital or outside of a hospital in the clinic, right, they're all systems. So working in the hospital, for example, as a psychiatrist, you're working with multiple other systems in the hospital. You're working with other specialties who will consult you if they have any psychiatric patients. You're having to work with hospital management. You're having to work with the legal team. There's a lot of legal topics that come up in psychiatry. So
Hmm.
you have to work with that system. And then again, in outside of the hospital, you still have a lot of systems that you have to work with. Again, the legal team, nursing staff, um, other providers that might be taking care of that patient. Like if that patient had heart disease, you would have to like work with your cardiologist to make sure that you're prescribing the right medication and you're doing the best thing for that patient.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's interesting that you say that because from a systems engineering standpoint, like a system has many different parts. So, for example, a systems engineer might deal with mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, the architecture's building. Like, let's say we're talking about a building that you're trying to build. So you have different components that you have to kind of manage and bring together. And that kind of sounds like a similar situation, especially when you're talking about diagnosing things like depression or PTSD. There are different signs throughout the body that can tell you whether or not a patient is going through this certain like this certain type of disease. And then also I like how you expanded it towards like how it's ran too, right? Because the healthcare system is a system in its own, right, and has to be managed like that. Kind of deviating towards that in terms of the managerial roles of like the healthcare, are they also MDs that manage that system, or is it can you go to school as like you know, and for an MBA or something, and then come out and become a healthcare administrator or manager.
Yes. So I was, yeah, exactly. Actually, most of the people that manage the hospital systems are
Yeah.
MBAs. And sometimes that creates a lot of dispute between the
Hmm.
hospital management team and the physicians. Because as
Yeah.
a physician, I am bringing a physician lens. I'm bringing a let's get this patient medication, let's get this patient housing, let's get this patient, um, you know, the right support system that they need. And sometimes um, when you have people that are not physicians that are running the hospital,
Hmm.
they're not seeing it through that lens. And hopefully, I'm not offending anyone with an MBA on this platform.
Yeah,
Um,
nah.
but hopefully, I'm enlightening them, right, to sort of explain how we physicians see things when we are working in a hospital, because that
Hmm.
does cause a lot of dispute, in my experience.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've always found that managers and from any background essentially are more trying to manage the budget or see how much they can get done with
Yes.
such little money, right? Whether it's their fault or not, but
Yeah.
like that's their concern. But us engineers, we want to, or even in the medical field, for yourself, you want to get the patient better, right? You
Hmm.
want to say, you know what, forget the money. Let's get this patient feeling better.
Hmm.
And that's the same way we are, right? In terms of we want to make things efficient, we want to make things durable. We want to make it we want to make the best creation that we could possibly make it.
Hmm.
But the managers are more like, okay, this is our budget, and kind of deviating or kind of along that path. Oh, go ahead. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I wanted to actually add you brought up as an engineer wanting to make things durable.
Mm-hmm.
And I've sort of been on this journey to create less waste. And
Okay.
part of that is buying things that are durable. The other day
Okay.
I saw a video, it was very interesting. And this person was talking about how a lot of companies are not making durable things because
Mm,
then the customer has to come back, right? If it doesn't last for 2 years, right, they have to come
mm-hmm.
back every 1 year, every 1.5 years to buy the same thing over and over again. And then the
Mm-hmm.
other piece is they're the other piece, like they're discontinuing things really early. So if you bought something, let's say you bought something in 2025, 2 years from now they've discontinued that product. So now you can't even replace parts on that product. Now you have to like completely reinvest into that product, whatever it may be. And so again, sort of it's interesting that you bring up how like engineers are trying to make something that's durable and actually gonna last for a long time. And then sort of the management side of things is like looking at the numbers and like how they can create more money and more revenue. Um,
Yeah. I I would also say that, and I'll list some examples here or name drop a little bit. And I think this is why this company is so good, though. This is their
mm,
strongest suit, is because they're really good at marketing and they're really good at selling,
mhm,
right? So like Apple, I'm just gonna put it out there.
mhm,
Their products, don't get me wrong, are really good, but like you said, you know, after a couple of years, your battery starts to slow down. They stop working on certain updates for however old your iPhone is. They
mhm,
stop working on those updates so that they push you to get the newest Apple products.
mhm,
The same with not necessarily cars nowadays, but in the past, a lot of cars and a lot of planes were very durable. That's why we're still able to use, like, let's say 2001 or 2002, like Toyota Camry or, Honda CRV. Or even the jets that we have right now are meant to be durable. Even the ones that they're flying around in the 80s and the 70s are still being used today,
mhm.
because of how durable they are. But nowadays, like you're saying, it's all about the budget. Put you know put what we can together and just call it a day.
Yeah,
you know
exactly. Yes.
um and so this leads on to my next question, which is about modeling, right? So in order for us to not have to build something physically, us engineers, We'll model a system using things like SolidWorks, AutoCAD, which is just like different simulation modules, and we'll run simulations to see how the the system should work, right? By collecting data, right? And so, are there areas of psychiatry that use this type of, data collection, modeling, or even like, you know, now they have AI out now. So is there any point of like psychiatry that uses these type of things to see how well a patient is doing or how well a patient can do, depending on the medication you provide for them or the treatment that you give them?
Mhm. So there's been a huge shift in medicine just across the board to use more evidence-based medicine. So what
Mm.
that means is prescribing or, sort of practicing based on evidence, based on things that have been researched, and there's clear data
So
that actually
so does that mean in the past people didn't use evidence or what?
It's kind of sad to admit that, but absolutely right. Especially,
Yeah.
and that's what has brought a lot of like mistrust on the psychiatric community. Sorry, people in
Mm,
the psychiatric community is that in the past, some of these things that psychiatrists did were not evidence based. The
mm,
classic example are lobotomies. That's where
mm.
they would drill a hole into your brain and sort of
Jesus.
squish around your brain and hope that you get better. There was no evidence that there was no data at that time, no evidence to show that it would actually work. And interestingly, even though there was a lot of evidence that it was not working, people still continued to do it for some time before it was eventually um, no longer done. So
Mm.
yes, to answer your question,
Yeah.
sadly, in the past, physicians, psychiatrists have done things that were not evidence based. Today, physicians still do that in the sense that um, sometimes we extrapolate from the data. So especially in psychiatry, for example, we use medications that are considered like off label, if that makes sense. Off label, so like um, well, actually, can you cut that part out? Because that's not true.
Okay. Okay. All right. I
I'm gonna go
got you.
back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
actually, no, keep it in, keep it in. Cool.
Yeah.
So even in today's practice, some physicians will still do things that might not necessarily be that might be not necessarily evidence based. So, in the sense that
Mm,
if you have a patient that has been on multiple medications, and you're sort of like treatment resistant, right? You sort of have
mm,
to then think about that patient and think about the evidence that you have available to you, and make a decision.
mm,
It's kind of hard to explain, but a lot of times, like psychiatrists, we use medications off label,
mm,
in the sense that like these medications were not necessarily researched, were not necessarily created for that specific problem. So classic example is trazodone. That's a very classic example. This is a
okay.
medication that was created for depression. And that's what like the data pool was initially for, was for depression. But now there was a lot of data that started to show that you need very high doses of it to treat depression.
Mm,
And there's a high risk of side effects that might not be that will probably not be tolerable at those high doses. So now we use it for sleep. We use very low doses for sleep. And so
okay.
in that way, we're using trazodone off label. It wasn't necessarily created for for sleep. It was created for depression, but we use it for sleep. So that's sort of like how I'm trying to explain that. I hope that makes sense to those that are listening.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Um,
I have a correlation to that in terms of the engineering standpoint. But yeah, I'll let you finish the rest of the question. Yep.
Yes. So evidence-based medicine is a huge push for that. There's also you brought up AI. Yes, so there is also a shift towards using more AI. There's an app called Open Evidence. And
Mm,
it's been actually growing popularity, where it's a really good app for physicians. I would not recommend this to the general population because
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
sort of like using Dr. Google. You don't know
Mm,
what you don't know, right? So open evidence, it sort of helps physicians make decisions about what medication to prescribe if like a patient has like kidney disease or liver disease or something like that. But I would not recommend, like, if you have liver disease or kidney disease at home, you're going on open evidence, asking open evidence what to use. Like, if you're in the general population, this app is specifically for trained professionals. Just want to emphasize
Okay.
that.
Okay.
But it is
Yeah.
an AI app that we use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to interject real quickly though, because I've seen memes of people like when your doctor goes to when your doctor uses ChatGPT to go through med school.
Yeah.
Um and
Yeah.
I'm hoping, like, do you really want your physician using AI though, or open evidence?
Yes, you do want your
Yeah,
physician.
okay.
Yeah. So you want your doctor looking things up. What you
Okay.
don't want to do is have a physician that has been practicing for 60 years, but they're not
Mm,
up to date about anything.
okay.
So this
Okay.
app, Open Evidence, the app that I mentioned, it's not sponsored, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But this app, for example, let's say you ask, what medication can I use for depression, right? That's
Okay.
very classic. As a psychiatrist, you should know that. You should not be looking that up. But let's say that's the question that you asked.
Hmm.
The app gives you the answers, so it gives you the options, and it also gives you a list of the articles. So, like the journal articles that it's referencing, it gives you those articles. So, as a
Mm,
physician, it sort of like pushes you to then look at those articles and learn about the new medications that are on the market, right? So you don't
okay.
and this will happen. This does happen in the medical community where you have physicians that say, "Oh, I'm gonna stick with this medication because that's what I've been using for the last 30 years." And it's like,
Mm,
and to me, as a new graduate, I'm like, well, there's a newer medication that is, has better evidence, has less side effects, but that older physician is just not comfortable with it, right? They're sort of like set in their old ways. Um,
mm,
and so you want a doctor that is looking things up. That's
mm,
I would strongly recommend getting a doctor that's like that says, "Oh, last
That's
last
open.
night I saw an article about a new medication." Just that's how you want your doctor to be thinking. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
The
Oh, and
last
then
part, yeah.
the other piece of your question was about using AI in medicine and medical school. So that can only work to an extent, right? So I would say like don't that should not make you afraid of physicians training. There's
Okay.
so many exams, so many practical exams that like you just cannot use AI, right? Like you can't use AI on your exam, your 4 hour exam, your 8 hour exam, your 10 hour exam,
Hmm.
your 2 day exam.
Hmm.
You can't
Yeah.
use it for your practical exams. So like, yes, maybe use AI to like do your homework for the one anatomy class, but like you can't use AI when you have to actually take your anatomy exam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to continue with AI and talk a little bit more about it because I think it's been blown out of proportion a little bit. I like to think of AI as a tool. And like you said, open evidence, I think is a tool, right? Which similar to the how when the calculator came out, now we're
Mhm,
using the calculator, right?
mhm,
We used to ride horses from state to state. Now we use cars, right? I like to think about it as a tool, and we need to understand how to use it for our benefits. Um, and what I want to talk to you about or ask you about is, do you personally, when you were in residency and when you have seen patients, use any type of digital tools? We talked about AI, but things like mobile apps, any wearables, like biofeedback devices, just um, any type of digital tool that you might use day to day, that you might use, or do you not use any at all?
so the open evidence that one is actually relatively new. I think I've only known about it for like less than a year. Prior
Hmm.
to that, and much this is a much older resource for physicians, is Up to Date. It's a
Up to
website.
date. Okay.
It's a website that is similar to Open Evidence, where you can literally, type what question you want, but it's more of it's more like Google than AI, if that makes sense. So that you
Okay.
Google your question on up to date, and then it will give you the answer, and it would give you the resources. So it would tell you this is the article that it's referencing, and so it's sort of your diligence as a physician to fact check those the articles that it's referencing and sort of make sure that it's referencing them appropriately. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I was more diving towards like, for example, and I don't know if this is still practiced today or if it's been outcasted, but things like shock therapy.
Oh,
So like a device like that for some type of trauma or whatever. Or maybe you might tell your patients to wear like a Fitbit to not a Fitbit or a wearable to monitor their
hmm
sleeping patterns. Maybe that's causing their anxiety.
hmm
So I'm just wondering if you've prescribed or asked your patients to or you've used any type of like digital wearable device in that sense, and it could be anything. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll start with the easiest question, is the wearable
Hmm.
device. So there's not
Okay.
much evidence that those really help.
Mm.
If anything, if I think most of the evidence actually shows that it increases the patient's anxiety and it
Okay.
doesn't actually provide any useful information. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
so if I had a patient that is having like, if I'm truly worried about how they're sleeping, I just order a sleep study. So that means that they go to a clinic, they go to
Mm.
a lab, and they sleep in the lab. They stay overnight.
Oh,
Have
okay.
people actually monitoring how they're sleeping, their heart rate, their they have a EEG, so it's monitoring your brain waves. It's monitoring your muscles, your muscle movement, because
Hmm.
your muscle movement changes as you sleep, and it's very important for sleep. So if I am truly worried, I just order a sleep study. I don't ask to get a Fitbit.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then for the other questions, as far as shock therapy. So shock therapy is called ECT. That's the technical
Mm.
name, electroconvulsive therapy.
Mm.
Unfortunately, it was a mode of treatment that was initially used in very inappropriate ways. However, it's literally the best mode of treatment that we have in psychiatry. For
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And
So
with proven evidence and data.
yes. So and it's sort of like it's very interesting because it has so much negative propaganda, but because it
Hmm.
has a lot of positive evidence like to support its use for specific diagnoses, we still continue to use it in the psychiatric community because it's just that good for those
Mm.
specific diagnoses. So classic example is, your 80-year-old grandmother who is depressed and does not want to eat, does not feel like getting out of bed. She's losing weight and she's getting thinner and thinner.
Yeah.
ECT, she's I there's ECT is the best treatment for her as far as like
Mm.
getting her to have some energy, getting her to start eating and to treat her depression. Right.
Wow. And okay. Mhm.
Yeah.
Eh,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and do you know, or can you elaborate on the science of that
Um, Oh man.
or
So
no?
I don't know much about the science of it, but
Okay.
here's what I do know is that it essentially creates a seizure in the brain. And I believe that seizure increases blood flow to certain parts of the brain, and it helps
Mm.
with things like depression. So I think that's how it works for depression. But fact check me on that. Please feel free to
Okay.
fact check me on that. But it
Mhm.
essentially creates a seizure. That's how it works. It creates a seizure.
Mm.
So for example, if you're taking benzos, so something like Clonopin, for example, your doctor would
Mm.
say, hold your Clonopin, don't take it for X number of days before your ECT session. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
mhm,
Yeah, I mean, I always find those things fascinating, down to
yeah,
the science of it. Like, for example, um, us engineers, we have something called neural networks,
mhm,
and it's based on basically the functionalities of the brain, right?
mhm, Yeah.
We also have something called differential pairs, which takes the differentials of two signals. So we might put a signal, if we want to hear like your heart rate, we might put
Mm-hmm.
a signal here, and then a signal like maybe somewhere at your leg, and then
Mm-hmm.
another one like at like a ground terminal. And then we take the differential of that, and we could see how you can calibrate the system to see your heart rate. So it's using something called a differential pair. But I'm always fascinated basically of how we use uh, we send electrical signals to the body, or we use the body as our feedback system for electrical signals, and then we use that to understand the body as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, maybe I'll dive more and read more into ECT.
Yes.
That's really cool.
Yes. Very fast.
Okay, and I wanted to mention this as well. You mentioned like right before I asked the question, it was you mentioned evidence, so it's not evidence based, but you mentioned how something was used, or it had evidence in something else, but then it
Off label.
correlated off label,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to say that it's similar in engineering in the sense that bigger companies, like back in the 60s and the 70s, it was like NASA, right? Because they had the fundings, they would try different things, right? I can't really think of one off the top of my head, but they would create things meant for like space travel, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it's found evidence that it's better to be put like on the tires of a car or something, and so
Mm-hmm.
we now use it like on the tires of the car. I can't think of a specific example, but um I think
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of like a similar correlation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that I don't want people to be afraid of using medications off label because when as a physician using a medication off label, there's usually a lot of data that supports using it off label.
Hmm.
And your physician should be telling you if they're using a medication off label. So,
I got you. Yeah. Okay. So I want to kind of rewind a little bit here. Um, and I want to talk a little bit about what medical school was like for you.
hmm.
So I know a lot of people who go into undergrad as either electrical engineer, bioengineering, even mechanical engineer, but they want to take the MCAT and get into med school. So I kind of want to talk to you about how that correlation was for you taking the MCAT. I do remember dropping you off. It was an early morning in Chicago, for you to take, yeah, for you, and then you had to go back again. So maybe elaborate on that, and then also how medical school was, for anyone with a technical background trying to correlate the two, expectations versus reality type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I do want to say, yeah, going from engineering to medicine is, it's very doable. I actually have a co-resident. He was an electrical engineer. If I'm hopefully I remember that correctly. But yeah, he did the full engineering undergraduate degree. I think he worked as an engineer for a couple years before returning to medical school. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, so journey through medicine. Oh boy. You have to have um an end goal. Like you have to keep your eye on the prize because it is a
Mm.
journey. It is a very long journey. There's gonna be lots of ups and downs. There's gonna be a lot of like trials and tribulations. So you
Yeah.
really have to like keep your eye on the prize. And sometimes I, definitely, also enjoy the journey, right? You have to enjoy the journey because it's 8 years of your life and you don't want to end up at 8 years like all you have is like your medical degree. That would be kind of sad. There should be other, like, you
Mhm.
should have like other experiences that you got along the way, memories, friends, relationships, things like that. So after, please enjoy the journey as well, but it is a journey. Let's see. So yeah, taking the MCAT, that was um I thought that was the hardest test of my life, but it wasn't. Uh,
Mm.
so before I took the MCAT, I remember studying. I did not pull all-nighters. I was never an all-nighter girly. The one time I put an all-nighter in medical school, I got very sick,
Mm,
and I barely passed the exam. So like it's just not for
mm,
me. But studying for the MCAT, I definitely put a lot of hours of studying into it. I think I so there's no like passing score, but obviously the higher you do, the more options you have, right? More options for medical school you have. And so I sort
mm.
of like passed that threshold by like 2 or 3 points. Um, and that was
Hey,
like
you gotta,
the
you
fifth,
made it. Yeah.
yeah, like the 50th percentile. And actually, so like a lot of medical schools, that's what they look at is have you passed that 50th percentile threshold? And fortunately, yeah, I passed it by like 2 or 3 points. So that really helped as far as applying for medical school. And then actually my application for medical school was interesting because so the medical school I went to is traditionally a 6-year program. So it's for people that are straight out of high school. And the benefit of that is that they do not have to take the MCAT if they go straight from high
Wow.
school into the program, right? So like
Wow.
huge benefit. Everybody
Yeah.
wants to do that, right? Um, the disadvantage of that is that they have no breaks. So
Mm,
they're in school all year round, always. So why that's important is because their application was due much earlier than all the medical schools. And I found that out like 1 month before it was due.
mm,
And this is important because I was in Chicago at the time. And for medical school applications, at the time, I don't know if it might be different now because post COVID everything. But from at that time for medical school applications, you needed a letter from the department, from like whatever department you were graduating from. And my
wow.
department chair refused to do it virtually. She wanted me to be there in person to meet with the committee. And my department chair was in Rolla, Missouri, which is
Hmm.
6, 8 hours drive. I didn't
Yeah.
have money for a train ticket or a plane, right? Back then, I was a broke college student, as broke could
Hmm.
be. So I had to drive down to Rolla just
Hmm.
for that meeting, just for that that meeting.
Yeah.
So I drove down to Rolla for that. I think I left Rolla. I think we went to like traveled for some other family thing, or maybe just worked out that way. I can't remember. But drove
Mm,
down to Rolla just for that meeting. Fortunately, the meeting went well. She sent me the letter, and then like I think I submitted my application like the day before it was due, like
mm.
right on time.
Yeah.
Um, then the other
Wow.
piece is I was waitlisted. So I still remember getting the email being waitlisted to that program, and I felt so devastated. Mind you, all the other medical schools that I applied to hadn't even like they had just like started their application process. So like, but that
Mm,
because that one school put me on the wait list, I was just like so like disheartened by that, and I just felt like I
mm,
wasn't good enough. There's a Also, there's a lot of imposter syndrome that comes along with like being a Black woman in medicine. I almost feel like it's unavoidable, like it's gonna happen at one
mm,
point or another, and so you have to figure out how to deal with that and how to cope with that. But yeah, so in that moment, I felt a lot of imposter syndrome. Um, so I was waitlisted, and then obviously later on accepted. I remember the morning I woke up, I always check my email first thing in the morning. So I roll out of bed on my phone, check my email. I saw the
yeah.
email and I literally started screaming. I
Yeah.
was so happy. I think I cried. And then I called my
Hmm.
mom. I think my mom was the first person I called.
Hmm.
Our mom.
Yeah. Oh,
First
yeah.
person I called
Yeah.
when I got that admission letter, and she was so happy, and it was great. It was great.
Mm.
Um, and
And
then
this is to UMKC, right?
yes, this is the UMKC.
University of Missouri in Kansas City.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yeah, so I got accepted, and then the other piece, so after that, um, so because they go all year round, and I was joining as like a regular path medical student, like versus like the ones that were from high school. So I was gonna start in January and I graduated in December. So I graduated in December, I had 2 weeks, and then I started medical school. So they're like
Wow.
no breaks. And those 2 weeks I
Oh
went,
yeah.
yeah, I went with our mom to Cameroon. So it
Mm-hmm.
was sort of boom, 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 go. Um, yeah, so like
Oh
I
yeah, because you
said,
graduated in December and then you
yes,
had the 2 weeks for vacation and then you started in January. That's true.
yep,
Okay, I do remember that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Brand new city, didn't really know anybody.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then so the hardest test of my life was step one.
That's what's called step one.
Step one, yes. So
Okay. All
that's
right.
the first board exam that you take during medical school, and that was just awful. And it was so awful to the point where I did my first practice exam and I didn't pass it. So I had a
Mm,
trip booked to Thailand, and I did the first practice exam, didn't pass it, and so I canceled my trip. I was like, I can't. Yeah, so I canceled my trip
mm.
just in preparation that I would fail the actual exam, because then if I failed it, I have to stay and study. Um,
Yeah.
but I ended up passing it, thank God.
Oh,
And then
so you could have gone on your trip.
I could have gone to Thailand, but
Yeah.
I went to Thailand later, so it's okay, it worked
Yeah.
out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so as far as the exams that you take in medical school, so that's something that's a cost that nobody talks about. Well, actually, let me put it this way. I don't think that the general population realizes how much of an investment it is to be a physician, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I get upset when the sort of people get angry at doctors for charging them a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
when those same patients will take thousands of dollars to buy a Chanel bag or
Mm-hmm.
Gucci slippers or
Yeah.
the latest Jordans, right? But they would
Mm.
not invest that amount of money into their health. Um,
Mm.
I understand though that the stakes are higher, right? So I get that like people should have access to free healthcare, but that's a systems issue. That doesn't have to do with your physician, right? Because
Yeah.
as your
Yeah.
for me as a physician, similarly to Chanel, right? Chanel invested millions of dollars into their business so that they can charge thousands of dollars for their bags. I have
Yeah.
invested hundreds of thousands of dollars
Mm-hmm.
into myself so that I can charge hundreds of dollars for my services, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
who covers that money? That's a different conversation. But so if that makes sense. So I get upset when
Yeah.
patients get upset at me when it should be, they should be writing their local congressman, you know,
100%. 100%. No,
right?
I
'Cause,
understand. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but
I
people
agree. I agree with that, by the way. I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So
Mm-hmm.
people underestimate how much of a cost it is, right? To become a physician. It's not just medical school that you have to pay for. Of course, that's the biggest bill, right? Can't argue that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest bill. But then there's the other ancillary costs. There's the cost of like you need a stethoscope, you need all these other materials to get through your practical exams that you have to pay for. Some medical schools will pay for it, it's included in your tuition. Others, it's not included.
Mm-hmm.
You need to pay for your board exams. Most board
Mm-hmm.
exams are at least $1,000. Least. That's
Wow.
minimum,
Yeah.
right? There was one exam, it just got canceled because after COVID, um, it was not practical anymore, but it was a skills-based exam that was required across the board for everybody, and it was only
Mm-hmm.
offered in specific states. So let's say you lived in Texas, and the exam is only offered in Washington D.C. You,
Wow.
as a medical student, you have to figure out how you're going to drive or fly to D.C., where you're going to stay, and how you're
Mm-hmm.
going to get back home. So things like that. Even your board exams after residency, I just paid my board exams, and like I had to like take a deep breath and like meditate afterwards, because that was like 2 grand, just
Jesus.
2 grand just gone for a board
Yeah.
exam. And the thing is, if you fail the exam, they're not giving you money back,
Like,
right? And
yeah,
I
you have
know
to
that
pay another 2 grand.
you got to pay another 2 grand. And I know a lot of people that do not pass these exams. So like it is a huge financial burden. Um,
Wow.
but yeah. Uh,
Yeah. So before we get too far, I want to kind of go back to to your med school
Mhm,
when you're applying. So you said
mhm,
you applied to UMKC.
mhm,
Which other ones did you apply to,
mm.
and which other ones did you get accepted to, if you don't mind talking about that? And
Yeah.
then also, how prestigious is UMKC when
Mm.
compared to the other schools you applied to?
Okay. So I applied to a lot of universities in Illinois because that's where I had family. I also
Mm,
applied to universities in Missouri because I was familiar with that. Um, I think I may have also applied to like more southern states, but I can't remember. That was so long ago. Um,
mhm,
so so because UMKC is sort of like I said, everything was sort of like shifted forward. Like they started their acceptance and their admissions much sooner. By the
mhm,
time everybody else starts interviews,
mm.
UMKC had already given me an offer.
I got you.
So what
Yeah.
that means is I did get, I think I had at least two other universities that reached out to me for an interview, and I
Mm.
declined because I had already accepted UMKC.
I s- I see. Yeah,
Yeah.
because for med school you have to get interviewed and everything like that first.
Exactly. Yeah.
I
And I
see.
think
Yeah.
what happens is like once you do accept a one medical school, they technically
Mm,
pull out your name from the pool. So like I don't
I
know
got
how
you.
this university even offered me an interview. Like I think technically you couldn't even be offered an interview after you've accepted an offer already.
I
Yeah.
got you. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. No, that's really interesting, and that's good information for the viewers, especially like, what you said about, the exams you have to take,
Hmm.
how to get how to apply to a 6 year college or 6 years med school.
Hmm.
So I hope they're appreciative of that.
Hmm.
Um, I want to get then now dive into residency.
Hmm.
So kind of the similar situation, right?
Hmm.
In terms of you kind of had to submit applications to different ones and then see how you get who picks you. And I think there's a special day for it, right? Across the year.
Yeah.
Can you remind me what it's called?
It's called Match Day. It's usually
Match day.
sometime,
Okay.
yeah, first or second week of March. It's
On
called
March.
Match
Okay.
Day. Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone's opening up the email, hitting the refresh.
Yes.
Some people
Yep.
end up being happy, some people end up being
Yep.
sad.
Hmm. Yep.
So which residencies did you apply to? And I know you got accepted to U of A.
Yes.
But can you walk us through that process?
Yeah, so applications are pretty straightforward. It's one online platform that all the residency programs use. So you upload your CV, your picture, letters of recommendation, etc., board scores, um, and then you have the interview. I think I applied to like 50, maybe 45 programs. Again, talking about costs, applications are not free.
Yeah.
Applications are not free. And the more competitive the program is, psychiatry at the time was getting more and more competitive. So it was recommended based on my CV, my board scores that I should apply for a lot of programs. So that's what I did. I applied for programs in North Carolina, South Carolina. I really wanted to stay in warm areas. Um,
Mhm.
so applied like honestly all the southern states: North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Mississippi. Um,
Oh, wow.
and no
Okay.
shade to them,
Interesting.
but I applied to Mississippi. Never been there,
Yeah.
but I was like, it's in the south, it's warm. Let's do it.
Hmm.
Tech. I applied to like all the programs in Texas. Um,
Mm.
I think
Texas
New
would have been good.
Mexico. Texas would have been fun, absolutely.
Mm.
New Mexico, obviously, Arizona, California, um, and I think I did one or two in Illinois because I also applied to med psych programs, so that's a combination of medicine and psychiatry, and there's
Mm.
only eight of them in the country, so I applied to all eight of them.
Mm.
I think there's only eight. I think it's eight. I applied to all eight of them, in addition to like regular psych programs.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Um, all right. Let's yeah, I just want to start talking about wrapping things up here a little bit and I really appreciate you coming on. But I just had a couple more questions for you. So for like an engineer, or a tech student that's curious about medicine, let's say you're a sophomore, um, and you're curious about medicine, number one, what would be some words of encouragement or warnings or reality checks you would advise them if they wanted to switch to pre-med?
Mm.
And then also, what is a good first step to exploring if it's right for them before they do the switch?
Yeah, so sort of some advice. Actually, I will start with the second question. So, like, I would recommend shadowing someone in medicine. Depending on who you know, it might be a little bit more challenging. But look in your literally ask anybody. I got my shadowing experience in undergrad through a friend, and like this friend had nothing to do with medicine. She just knew
Mm,
someone in the community that was a physician. Like
mm.
I think she knew a friend that was a friend of a physician, if that makes sense. And she was
Mhm,
like, "Oh yeah, reach out to this person. They might be able to help." And I reached out, and like, it worked out. So like,
mm.
ask anyone. Literally, ask all your friends, ask your neighbors, ask the Uber driver, if they know any
Yeah.
physicians that want people to shadow them. Um, so yeah, so get some shadowing experience, do some volunteer work. That's a really good way to like get some healthcare experience just to see if you like
Mhm,
it, right? Because healthcare, the biggest reality check about healthcare is that you
mhm.
need a lot of patience.
Yeah.
Lot of patience. Unless you're
Yeah.
gonna be a surgeon where like all your patients are basically, they're under anesthesia, and you
Yeah.
don't really have to talk to them. You need a lot
Mhm.
of patience to deal with humans, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I was gonna say no pun intended. Like you need a
oh,
lot of patience,
yeah,
but
yeah, to deal
patient,
with patients, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Patience, yes.
yeah.
So that's I think that's that's a huge reality check is that you need a lot of patience. And so
Mm,
getting some experience in the healthcare field, just to test how patient are you, and is that something that you can work on, that you're willing to work on. For me,
nice. Mhm,
I did some shadowing, but then I also worked as a CNA in nursing homes, and I would tell you,
mhm.
working with the elderly will teach you patience by fire by force. You will learn
Yeah.
it, or you quit, or you quit. Um,
Mhm,
and then what else? Yeah, and then so about the pre-med path. So the thing about pre-med path is like it's essentially a cluster of classes that you need to get into medical school. So you can technically be any major that you want, but then you can
mhm,
add on these classes in order to fulfill your requirements for your medical school application. So, you have a lot of people, for example, that are in engineering, they would do their engineering path and do the engineering major and do all the engineering classes, but then add
mhm.
on the pre-med classes like biology, anatomy, biochemistry, I think is another one that's required. Organic
Okay.
chemistry is required as well. So you can
Mhm,
add those on in addition to like your regular major, whatever that is. Some people are arts majors and then they just add on
mm,
pre-med classes. It's easier to be a biology major because a lot of the biology major classes obviously correspond with the pre-med classes that are required. So that's the
mhm.
easiest pathway. But if you truly want a degree in like anything else, you can do that and add on pre-med classes.
I see. I
Mhm.
see.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just in terms of yourself, if you don't want to dive into this, that's okay. But would you ever consider starting your own practice?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
actually, I wanted to
Hmm.
go back. You asked one of the things that I want to say as far as advice is, do not go into
Mm,
medicine for the money.
mm,
You can make
mm.
a lot more money doing less stressful things.
Yeah.
I know people that have gone through med school, were miserable in med school, were miserable in residency, and are miserable as
Mhm,
attendings. People that have gone through up to residency and drop out of residency because they're so miserable. Don't do it for the money
mm.
because you're gonna end up all these loans and you're gonna hate your life. But to going back to your question about, will I have my own practice? Absolutely. That's my
Yeah.
goal. Hopefully I'll get to the point where I can, be in a more stable location and I can start my own practice and grow my practice from there. But yeah,
Nice.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. And then what is I always ask this to all my guests. I think all of them have had some fascinating answers to this question. And it's basically just what is one piece of advice or a word of wisdom that you want to give to the audience? And this isn't pertaining to specific medicine or engineers, just anybody. One piece of advice that you follow or that you think is um, um, very important for an individual to have.
Mm. Be kind. You as a psychiatrist, honestly, as a human, you should appreciate this. But as a psychiatrist, I truly appreciate that everybody is going through something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody
Yeah.
is going through something. And even if they're not, they deserve kindness.
Yeah.
Even if they're a billionaire, they still deserve kindness.
Yeah.
So be kind. It costs so little. Being kind could be, saying hi, smiling to somebody, giving somebody a hug, giving somebody, the other half of your fries. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, volunteering, if you have more time, giving to a charity, but just being kind is something that's so small, but can have
Mm-hmm.
such a huge impact on people. But then I don't see enough kindness in this world. I'm turning into like an old grandma, like I wish the world was kinder, but
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know that people are kind enough to each other.
Got
So
you.
that would be my advice is just be kind.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And I think that's a good one because I mean, me personally, I use it all the time.
Hmm.
Even because like you said, you never know what someone's going through, right? Um, and sometimes they don't want to disclose that, right? But they're stuck in a space where since they can't disclose it, you're thinking they're trying to attack you, right?
Hmm.
But I just kind of keep my cool and try and be kind, like you said. And I really do like that one. And it's interesting because none of my audience have repeated the same words of wisdom yet.
Mm,
So I like that. Yeah.
nice.
Or none of my sorry, my host or my
Yeah.
interviewees. Yeah. Is there a place do you want to name drop any type of social media or anything like that?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so as far as like I said, enjoying things outside of medicine, one of my
Hmm.
biggest passions is thrifting and sewing. I
Yep.
have a thrifting and sewing page. I'm not so great with creating the content, but some of it is on there. It's
Hmm.
called Fab Finds. So FAAB underscore
Hmm.
FINDS on Instagram.
Okay. Yeah. And folks, she's really good at finding some really good stuff at the thrift stores and really changing them out. So definitely check out her page. I'll definitely go ahead and put a link to her Instagram in the description below. And yeah, if you like the video, please like it, comment anything interesting you found, any questions you want me to relay to Dr. Govalla, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you see me fading?